Hello and welcome to Law and Order SVU here on FANVERSATION. I am Yael Tygiel. That's Taylor Gates. Hi Taylor, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
Good. This is season 26, episode 13, Extinguished. If you need to talk to somebody, if you were assaulted, please reach out to RAINN. Their number is 1-800-656-4673, 1-800-656-4673. Yes, I recited it with my eyes closed. I'm so proud. Taylor, what does it spell?
It spells hope.
It does spell hope. Amazing. Before we jump into this episode, consider this your content warning. Sometimes the show deals with serious issues, and when things go dark, we make light, and that is how we deal with them. All right, I've warned you. Let's jump into it. Taylor, what did you think about season 26, episode 13?
Well, you didn't give us the quick cap yet.
Sorry. Here is the quick cap. Velasco teams up with a community security guard eager to prove his mettle to find a suspect in the assault of two teens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, I like that we got to see more of who this man is because he doesn't usually have much of a personality, so it was really nice to see him get more of a personality. And I think the theme of community involvement is nice and important, and something I wasn't sure we were going to do when we saw the beginning of this season, when they were all, yay, cops. They've never done anything wrong in their lives. So I think was a refreshing little change. And it reminded me so much of the Sharon Stone episode with the guy who wants to be a cop so bad, and he keeps trying and doing the wrong thing. And I love that episode, and so we did just do it again, but I like the trope, so I was fine with it.
See, I don't know how you could compare this with Fletcher, because that was a great episode.
Yeah, I just mean I like that concept. I will say I'm also biased because I talked to Velasco for this episode, and I feel like that conversation made me appreciate it more. So, yeah.
So let me
Not to
say
jump the
this.
gun and advertise this, but it did affect how I felt about it.
It absolutely impacts my viewing of this episode, because until I read your interview with the actor who plays Velasco, which is linked in the description below, everyone who is listening or watching us wherever you are, I felt that provided so much insight and context to this episode in a way that I think this episode failed. I think that there were so many amazing opportunities that this episode chose not to deal with, and hearing Octavio Pisano talk about it with you really helped me go, oh, that's what's happening. Because upon first viewing, Velasco's life, listen, I am single, and up until, recently, I lived alone for a long time and was very happy. So that's not what I'm saying. The life that we saw that Velasco is living was a sad, lonely life. And so I felt like we didn't get enough explanation or context. And then if you read the interview, you're like, oh, yeah, that actually I totally understand why he is the way he is.
That's the thing. I feel like and we'll obviously go deeper into this, but I feel like it was almost too subtle, which is really not what SVU was known for. They usually like to hit you over the head with a lot of themes and ideas, but I feel like they threaded it too vaguely, and I feel like they're relying on us remembering stuff from a couple seasons ago, which, to be fair, obviously we do to an extent. The casual viewer is not going to remember some of the stuff that we learned a couple of seasons ago and how that would impact things, I don't think. So I really think that with a procedural show like this, that the last time we've heard of some of these topics have been literally years ago. I think a little reminder, even just a line or two, really could have hung the lantern on. That's what you say in creative writing. If you want an idea to be expressed more obviously, I feel like it needed a couple more of those callbacks in the episode for it to make sense and communicate the themes they're trying to communicate.
Absolutely. And not just about Velasco and his feelings towards the community, but also like the community's feelings towards police. It reminded me of the season premiere where they were like, they don't trust cops. Why might that be?
Yeah.
Why might that be?
Yeah, and I feel like this episode did okay with that, or at least they were like, well, it is important for them to actually trust us. But it's like, but maybe we go even deeper and like talk about the actual systemic issues instead of like, let's just be friends with them. Like, okay.
So like agreed that they did acknowledge this neighborhood does not trust cops. And there's one line that was like, in the countries they come from, the cops are not to be trusted. Yes, but in this country also.
Yeah, like
This country also, the cops are not to be trusted. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about why they feel this way, especially because we had like both Anna and Moses's parents were like, don't talk to the cops. Which I found so. Anna's father is the fucking worst. When he's like, why aren't you doing anything? Sir, we're trying. You keep interrupting. We're trying. We need to know what happened.
I was so shocked that this episode didn't go in certain directions that I thought it was going to go because they were so anti-talking to the cops. I thought it was less the cops are bad thing and more like we are a part of this like gang or mob or whatever. Like there has to be something that they're like covering, you know what I mean? Because I was like, you guys are being really suspect about like what they're allowed to tell the cops in a way that didn't feel like we don't trust the cops. It was like we're protecting someone in this neighborhood is what it felt like.
You're totally right. When she asked what kind of knife it was, and the girl looked at her dad to be like, "Can I tell them?" And then when she said it was a box cutter, I went,
I think
"Is that
gang? It's like some kind of gang's tool that they're like known to use." Like
no,
it didn't matter.
It was so like we knew he had a knife. We want to know what kind of knife. Why is that a secret?
I agree. I thought that was so strange.
Also interesting, the specific neighborhood, right? This was Washington Heights. Here's what I know about Washington Heights. I saw the movie of In the Heights. That's
a great movie, actually.
That's the same neighborhood, everybody.
Yes. It's from that musical, a great musical, underrated gem.
That's my knowledge.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, and I guess also for everyone who's watching us live. And we do have people here live with us. Daryl's here, Tuesday's here, Alexa's here, Deanna is here. Hello. My question is, Taylor.
Yes.
Do you feel obligated to your neighborhood?
No, I feel like that's a very specific question, though. I don't know. I've never been like a neighborhood girly. Like even in the Midwest, like that was not a thing. But I think that's just because my parents are kind of antisocial.
So okay, I used to watch and I used to cover for AfterBuzz shows like Arrow, which and this is relevant because when Arrow, who was a vigilante superhero, right, when he would take down a bad guy, he would say to them, "You have failed this city." And I never felt so protective of a city, of a neighborhood, in that way. And even like, I think about it and I think maybe it's because I moved a lot growing up. But even the city that I like consider, I consider I'm from San Francisco, even though I grew up in a suburb of the San Francisco. San Francisco is the city that I loved the most and that I loved living in. And yet, if the city went to hell in a handbasket, which it seems to be doing, what am I like? I'm not feeling super protective. And I was like, is this a thing because I moved so much growing up? So you're telling me this was not a thing for you. You don't feel protective or obligated to where you live now or where you grew up?
Not particularly, but I want to make some distinctions because not to get on a soapbox, but I do think this is sort of an old school idea because everyone now is so connected with people all over the world through social media and the internet and stuff. And I feel like, you talk to your parents and like if they grew up in like the 80s, whatever, 70, whatever, wherever they grew up, I feel like there was this culture of like the kids are outside all playing together. There's like a neighborhood barbecue. There's like a block party. And I think in the city, that's especially true too. Like you see people on like their stairs, like hanging out in New York and stuff like that. So I feel like it's sort of an old school idea. And I think it could be somewhat specific to cities, although there is definitely that culture like in the suburbs too, for sure, of, you know, the church picnic or whatever. And I also think that part of me does feel a bit protective of like Los Angeles now. Like when the fires happened, there was definitely that sense of like all of LA, I feel like sort of coming together and like taking care of the people who had to evacuate or lost their homes. And so I feel like I felt sort of a sense of community then. So during tragedy, I think that rings pretty true too. So I think those 2 points are sort of important in like the fact that it's sort of old school and there was a tragedy that occurred.
You make an excellent point, because I definitely felt like during the fires here in LA, it was a lot of everyone, you know, talking to everybody, making sure people were safe and had what they needed, and trying to help, and, you know, promoting GoFundMe's and whatever. And, you know, donations and everything. So I do hear what you're saying there, but I also agree that it does feel like an old school thing. But I also wonder if it's like a big thing in New York, in that, like, you know, people are very like, I'm from this neighborhood and this neighborhood is the best neighborhood. But also, I mean, not to get into lines, but Silva has the line, "This is New York. I thought we were supposed to ignore our neighbors." And I was like, yeah, I thought we were supposed to ignore our neighbors too.
Yeah.
Alexa says, I love my city and still live in the same neighborhood I grew up in. Longtime resident and friend are very protective. Longtime residents and friends are very protective. Okay.
I feel like it's true in certain cities. Like I have a friend from New Orleans, and that's like her city. Like she's extremely protective of it over it. She loves that city. So I think it does kind of vary too, depending on like the culture of the place. Yeah, I think it really just depends.
Okay, Deanna in the chat says, I felt that way when the fires and plane crashes in Philly, for someone who has friends and family that lost family that lives there. Whew.
Are you okay?
No. I'm not okay.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Reading is hard, everybody.
Reading is hard.
All right. I'm glad I could hear from different people in different cities, and how they feel and where they feel, but also like back to your suburbs, small towns, church picnic thing. Like that also feels like a very like old school Americana thing that I, as someone who, one, grew up in California, and two, never attended a church, cannot relate to those things.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Daryl says, I moved over a dozen times across 2 countries, though I lived in my town for over 20 years at this point. And protective of any of the places. Yeah. I'm looking through, I have very few notes, I'm gonna be honest. Here are my thoughts. Another question for you and the chat. Breakfast for dinner. When someone says breakfast for dinner, are you expecting an egg white omelet, or are you expecting pancakes?
I'm expecting pancakes.
Thank you.
Although this is not what I would think when I think breakfast for dinner. And this is a tangent that doesn't matter, but sometimes my mom would not want to cook, and so it was called find your own night, find your own dinner. And so we would have cereal a lot, and that's technically also breakfast for dinner.
Totally.
But that is not what I would first think of. I would think of like a pancake, waffle, eggs and bacon type thing, not like an omelet. Like that's a little bit crazy to me.
I agree. I think cereal for dinner absolutely is breakfast for dinner.
Yeah.
And Deanna says pancakes and sausage. And then this is the key here. Thank you, Alexa. Eggs any time of day. Absolutely. That's not a breakfast for dinner. That's just eggs for dinner. Tuesday says omelets are breakfast too. We could do both. Listen, disagree. Daryl says, I expect a fry up. You're so British. And hash browns. Yes, Deanna. Good call.
Gotta have the potato in there.
Okay, so I was like, he gave him egg whites and vegetables, and I love vegetables, but that's not breakfast for dinner.
No.
All right. What did you think about the like whole vigilante justice and the sketch and then the wrong dude? First of all, that sketch was a sketch of the first guy.
Yeah, the sketch was all another reason why I was like, everyone's covering for someone in this neighborhood because they're acting so weird and suspicious at the like lineup from the sketch thing too. They're like, no, that's not him. I'm like, that's absolutely him, but okay. So that was just weird. There was a lot of red herrings. I was like, that's just stretch. Like, you guys are really like, this is almost leading in the way that's like offensive and like doesn't make any sense. But he was so good at describing.
He was
I mean,
great.
evidently he wasn't because it ended up being that.
Here's the
He
thing.
has a lot of details.
In the conversation, there was a computer-generated sketch and a hand-drawn sketch, and they were completely different. They were totally different. The hand-drawn sketch was 100% a sketch of that first person. Whether he was the guy or not, that is who was sketched.
Yeah. I feel like we've seen vigilante justice a lot. I was like, okay, it's kind of makes sense that it went there, frankly, but I wasn't particularly compelled by that aspect because I feel like we've seen it 8 billion times.
But I honestly wish it would have come out in some sort of way of this neighborhood does not trust the police and therefore have their own community watch. And then that would have been an interesting discussion. And then to have Danny, our wannabe cop, part of the vigilante justice, then get arrested and go, why am I getting arrested? Sir, did you take the police exam?
Yeah.
Don't you know that
you're not a cop?
Yeah. Daryl in the chat agrees with me. Thank you, Daryl. The computer generated one looked more like the actual guy. Yes, the hand drawn one looked like the first guy that they found. But I did like the community outreach montage with Danny. I really liked that one. And it gave us the buddy cop duo that I want because you've got Velasco as the grumpy guy and you've got the kid as the golden retriever.
Yeah, no, I love that like trope so much.
I would watch more of that. Could we do that?
Same. Oh, this is so nitpicky.
Please.
I have to talk about it.
That's what we do here on the S Review podcast.
She says he has a ram tattoo, so I think he was born in April. Aries starts in March, so he also could have been born in March. And I think that you need to clarify that because if we're going to think that she's this astrology bitch, she should know that the cutoff date begins a month before, so it could have been either of those 2 months. Say, I think he's in Aries. Don't say, I think he was born in April. That pissed me off.
Let's talk about this.
That pissed me off.
I am so impressed with the zodiac knowledge.
I'm gay.
Not you.
Oh, I was gonna say.
No, I'm yours. I'm aware of this character.
Okay, yeah.
Literally, my note said astrology for the win. I am trying to think like, had I been watching this or had I been this girl and had I seen the tattoo, I am not an astrology person. One, I would have never known what symbol that was. Two, I don't think I wouldn't have known it was Aries. I wouldn't have known it was supposed to be a ram. I would have been like, oh, it was like a swirly thing. Let me draw it for you.
No, I would have known. But I would never have said born in April because I'm an Aries and I know it's not just April.
Yeah, Alexa asks the important question. Couldn't she have just said it's an Aries tattoo?
Yes, that's what I think she should have done too. That made me angry.
But I do appreciate that she kicked him hard in the nuts.
She was a boss bitch. I loved her.
She was great. Let's give some actor shout outs. So this episode, actually, let's start with this episode was directed by Heather Quick. So kudos on direction. Of course, Velasco is played by Octavio Pisano, and there's an interview with him on Collider with Taylor in the description below, or wherever you're listening to this, it's in the description. Danny, our kid detective.
Really not a child.
Whatever. Cop kid. Danny was played by Ethan.
Not help you.
What?
You still said kid.
Yeah, I said cop kid.
He's not a kid. He's a grown man.
Is he?
Well.
Okay. Ethan Jones Ramiro is the actor's name. Anna, our first victim, was Mariana Garzon Toro. I'm making this bigger so I can see it because you all know how much I struggle to see. Angel, our grandpa, was played by Jose Febas. Lena is the almost victim for the attempted assault is Mia Rose Morgan. Great performance. Also, beautiful woman. Anna's piece of shit father was played by Manuel Poblete. I'm sorry on pronunciation. Any other shout outs we need?
I don't think so.
Moses was played by Andres Rodriguez. Anybody else we want to hit? Those were the performers we wanted to shout out, which seems rude to the rest, but everybody was great.
You were all great. You were.
Also, he was a kid.
Yeah, he was fully in his 20s.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay.
He was like Fletcher, who was, what was he, 16, pretending to be an adult?
Yeah, but he wasn't that.
SVU Fletcher.
I wonder how he's doing.
What?
I wonder how he's doing.
Fletcher, Brad Fletcher. Great episode.
I need to know how he is. And
the episode is called Wannabe.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so at the end of this episode, right? Velasco finds a way to help Danny be cop-like by becoming an auxiliary officer. The last time I believe we heard about auxiliary officers is the case. You know which one I'm talking about. With the little boy who goes missing, and then it seems like it's tied to a case from 20 years prior. Somebody in the audience is going to tell me what I'm talking about. And then it's the what's his name? Tom Sizemore was the guest star as the pervert who owned the buildings and then would burn them down to cover the body.
Okay, yes, I'm remembering now, but I don't know the specifics.
Well, that case had an auxiliary officer, Lomatin. Wow, why do I know random things and not the name of the episode?
I don't know. Terrifying.
Anyway, that's the last time we learned about auxiliary officers. So the fact that we brought it back this time, interesting. Alexa in the chat says, when the neighbor had caught the offender at the end, it reminded me of how Richard Ramirez was caught. Which episode is Richard Ramirez? I mean, we've had Richard Ramirez is a real person.
I don't know, honestly.
I'm
bad at names.
A real serial killer. Interesting.
Oh, serial killer. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Listen. Some of us.
I don't true crime.
Yeah. This is not a true crime podcast. If you want that, I'm not going to encourage you to listen to other SVU podcasts because they make me sad.
But thank you for bringing it up, Alexa. That is not to say that you shouldn't have brought that up and we're mad at you. I appreciate you drawing the connections for us because we don't know jack shit about any of that.
Thank you. Yes, what Taylor said.
A documentary about it. So,
literally speaking of, somebody posted. There's like some wild story about these women who like fake their own death and then murdered some guys, and there's a cult involved, and it's whatever. It's ongoing. I cannot wait for that to conclude so I can see the documentary about it.
Yeah, same.
Ugh.
Okay.
We're all over the place. What did I I wanted to talk about the like end where Velasco now has his like place where he drinks free beer and then calls Finn to get a free beer. If I were the owner of this restaurant, I'd be like, no, you can't just bring your friends here for free beer.
No. I did feel like this episode had about 3 different endings, I will say.
Yes.
I was like, oh no, it's not over.
I mean, so it was Velasco and the grandfather.
Yeah.
Then it was Silva and Bruno with the first victim. And then it was Velasco again with Finn and then going up to the kid and giving him the card.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't dislike any of them, but I was like, this ended 4 times. Like, this is never gonna stop. Like, we just keep tacking stuff on. Which I don't here I wanna like make it clear. I don't hate that because I feel like very often we don't have room to breathe in these episodes because they are so short. And so I was like, I'm glad I felt like we actually got through a lot and learned a lot in this episode, which I like. I feel like it was dense and the time was used pretty smartly in a lot of ways. So I didn't hate the fact, but I was just like, it keeps going.
I will say this. I feel like the show has, especially this season and probably the last few seasons, but I'm like seeing it more now. It feels like we're obligated to wrap things up with the victim, even if the story is gone in a way that we don't necessarily need to wrap things up with the victim.
I agree, actually, because we've been kind of, not to be British, but like taking the piss out of the fact that Olivia is constantly being like, it's gonna be okay to people. And it's like, we don't really need that. Like, we kind of just assume that happens off screen. So I agree with you. It's kind of weird. It feels a bit forced.
Like this episode specifically, Silva telling Anna and her parents, I didn't need that. Last episode, having Silva go, was it Silva who went back to the girl with the boobs?
I think so, which we didn't care about her at that point at all.
Right, like we've already moved past her.
Yeah.
And then there was other ones this season where like we wrapped up what the case was, we dealt with the perp, we like dealt with whatever the issues the cops were having, everything was dealt with, and then we needed Benson to like tell the person they were going to be okay. And I was like, this felt like an unnecessary scene. It feels like the show feels obligated to do it, but it no longer feels right all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
And I wonder, I feel like when there were more what's the word I'm looking for? Episodes that were like trying to do something unique. Experimental episodes like Doubt. You know, some cases like that. Like one of my favorites. What is the episode called where the girl does porn and then she gets raped in her college and she's doing the porn just to pay for college?
I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the name of the episode.
Okay. But so like both of those episodes ended in a way that was so different. They don't, tell them they're going to be okay. The case ends how it ends. I feel like we used to do more of that.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if it's like a new studio people doing those, new showrunner. I don't know. But I do agree with you that that's interesting and it feels a bit off.
Yeah. On that note, now that we've complained a bunch, let's compliment some lines.
I think we were pretty nice. I agree. I didn't hate this episode.
I didn't hate this episode. I think there were some interesting things that went in ways that could have been more interesting.
Yes, I agree with you.
Just a couple lines. I said one earlier, this is New York. I thought we were supposed to ignore our neighbors. And then also, so my pain in the ass neighbor is in jail for going after the wrong guy. I just really would like Velasco and Danny to be partners.
I agree, honestly.
All right, what do you got?
You look like you collided with the A train. Neighbor kept me up all night with his music. Should have called the cops. So silly. What are you gonna do about that? Yeah, nothing. Like, the people at the park were so vicious and aggressive, and I kind of loved it. So we're screwed then. How's that different from any other day? I love when they show the guy the like sketch. You're telling me you don't see any resemblance between you and him at all? Yeah, kinda. He like had to admit that, like, straight up that looked like him. You moved all the way here from Juarez just to avoid talking to your neighbors? Maybe so. Can you describe him under 6 feet? I thought that was such a subtle dig because men and their height. Under 6 feet being the first thing is crazy. I love it. I kicked him right in the nuts. Classic, as you already said. And I just love the moment at the end where Olivia tells him to take the rest of the night off, and Finn, like, either high fives himself or claps. I don't know what he does in the background, but it cracked me up. So yeah, I thought there were some good ones for sure.
It's honestly like seeing the team joke together is one of our favorite things. We like seeing them interact together. But I feel like specifically with this case, when they had to start from square one because the lineups failed and there was no DNA evidence, and we ended up not having anything to find us any clues, I was like, that's police work. Like, you guys always find a clue and then harp on that and then stay on that one path and keep going that way. And then sometimes you're completely wrong and you're like, well, now we have to start over. Yeah, because maybe from the beginning, try different avenues.
Yeah, to have a couple balls in the air at once.
Yeah. All right, well, those are best lines. I guess it's time for shower thoughts. Ooh. I have quite a few things that I've learned, and so my shower thoughts and my learning are all together.
Okay.
So for our friends who are listening in the shower, there's a part earlier in this episode where they're offered free coffee. And then at the end of the episode, they are offered free beer. And I could have sworn the cops are not allowed to accept anything for free, even if they're off the clock.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked into it. And it is a question of ethics versus the law, right? So the acceptance of gratuities, even a free cup of coffee or a discounted meal, can constitute bribery if the compensated officer is disposed not to enforce the law against the person granting the gratuity.
Mm.
So they're not supposed to accept free anything so that if something happens, they wouldn't be accepting a bribe. So the fact that this episode had multiple times, also like in a neighborhood that doesn't trust police, multiple times people were trying to pay them off, is and that the cops were like, yeah, okay, very interesting. Especially because now that I think about it, with your whole point that like, it was kind of suspicious, like they were protecting people. It almost now feels like this entire neighborhood is like, yeah, we're going to give you free drinks so that we can continue to protect the gang in this neighborhood.
Yeah, for real. I was like, true.
So those are my shower thoughts. I could have sworn they're not allowed to take anything, and it's true, they're not supposed to. But legally it's not against the law.
That's interesting. That makes me think of like politics, because I know that politicians are only allowed to accept stuff of a certain monetary value, I want to say. Like they're allowed to accept up to like $100, like certain offices. I bet that changes, obviously, like where you are and what position you are. But I always find that pretty fascinating too. And I guess it's kind of a similar thing to cops, although there's no monetary thing for them. It would just be any of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's interesting. That's just an interesting idea, total.
Right? Hence shower thoughts.
Yes. Think about it.
Yeah. Also, if you're listening in the shower, thank you. We love that you listen in the shower.
Yeah, I'm honored.
I'm super honored. All right, let's talk about what did we learn Did you learn anything? Because I have quite a few things.
Well, honestly, I forgot all about the whole auxiliary officer thing from the other episode, so I did kind of learn that in this just because I forgot about it from before, which is interesting. I kind of didn't realize. I mean, it makes sense that you would have like a junior police kind of to do the more, low-key crowd control and traffic stops and stuff, but I guess I didn't really realize that was like a thing.
So I went into some research as to what an auxiliary officer is. And according to Wikipedia, auxiliary officer, also called volunteer police, reserve police, assistant police, civil guards, or special police, are usually part-time reserves of a regular police force. They may be unpaid volunteers or paid members of the police service in which they are affiliated. There is no consistent international definition. That I think is a key right there, especially when you talk about like problems in police and problems in the system of policing, is that you have this concept of volunteers who are kind of cops, but there's no like definition of what that means. Red flag.
Yeah.
In the US, many police departments and sheriff's departments operate with their own auxiliary police. Their powers, scope, armament, and transportation vary between each agency. Red flags.
Yeah.
Wild. The Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that as of 2013, so a long time ago now, there were over 29,000 unpaid reserve auxiliary officers in the US. About 32% of local police departments had a reserve officer program. Large cities generally have more reserves than smaller cities. 62% of police departments that patrol areas with a population of over 1 million have a police reserve program, while only 26% of the smallest departments serving population less than 2,500 do.
I guess that makes sense. It makes me think of like a volunteer firefighter almost. Like it's the same ish vibes,
Ish. A little different.
I mean, yeah, no. It is very different. And let me just be very clear about that. Like, we love our firefighters. We have some issues with the cops. But I just find that interesting how both of those jobs like have a sort of volunteer auxiliary sort of reserve program.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like both of those, I always think that like they shouldn't. You know what I mean? It's firefighters too. I'm like, that feels like you should be super, super trained, and you shouldn't be volunteering for that. But I don't know, and that's just interesting to me on both counts.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that what we need in a lot of these instances is not more cops, and two, different things that would actually better the situation.
100%. I mean, we talked in this episode about community stuff.
Yes.
Which, like, why are we not doing that and putting more resources into helping this community thrive and sort of quote unquote govern themselves in a way? Like, that feels like the thesis of this episode that they didn't mean to do, because I feel like the show, it is propaganda at the end of the day, but I feel like it proved that maybe the cops are not actually always the answer, and they tried to make it be the answer at the end there, because of course they did. But in my opinion, this episode kind of gave a lot of credence to the idea of like, maybe we should not be policing the way that we are and putting as much resources into that, instead putting it into the actual community and the people in it.
Absolutely.
Just saying.
Other things we learned. Alexa in the chat says Chino Latino is new to me, but I knew what they meant. Yeah. Interesting use of that term. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if it's correct or not. But I learned, and this is another weird thing, about lamp cords. I did not know that is a thing you could just purchase by itself.
That's weird.
They kept saying it, and I was like, what is a lamp cord? And then I Googled it, and it is literally the like cord in your lamp. I did not realize you can like replace those. I thought when those break, you get a new lamp.
And you can just get it at the dollar store? Like, that's weird too.
That doesn't surprise me. As somebody who has lots of things from the dollar store.
I guess, but that's such a random thing to like. I feel like you would have to go to a hardware store or something for that.
There's a lot of hardware stuff you can get at the dollar store that is actually decent. Like,
Right, but like wrenches, nails, hammers, like lamp cord feels obscure to me.
I mean, you can get like an extension cord at the dollar
Yeah, but
store.
lamp specifically.
That's the thing, is it's like just wires that plug into a wall, and then you like reattach your lamp. Deanna says you can
I
also
don't
get it
know
from
about
Five
that.
Below.
I've never replaced the lamps.
I didn't know that this was a thing you could even buy.
I barely replaced the bulb. Like when it goes out, and now I don't have light there.
Sometimes I forget that you're a child.
I'm not a child. I'm
You
the
and
same
Danny
age
are
as
kids.
Danny. To be clear, I have light in this house. I mean, this is
Obviously, we can see it.
Obviously, I have light, but sometimes it takes me a second to get the motivation to go buy a new bulb and change
I mean, look at all of those lights that you have.
Look at all of these beautiful lights in my mansion. My grand piano
also,
over there.
With such good windows.
Yeah, this is my real house.
Daryl says, I don't own a lamp. Daryl, I'm judging. Wait.
That's horrifying because overhead lights, that's really bad for my like sensory well-being.
I forgot that like apartments don't have overhead lights. Like when
I only have lamps in my like, main living space. Yeah.
In every place I've lived in LA, I think this is the first place I've lived that has whatever ceiling lights.
There's ceiling lights in my kitchen, bathroom, closet, but in my like main living, no, none. I just use lamps.
Well, I have some lamps that I don't use right now, and now I know that I can just replace the cord.
You sure can.
That's what I think is so great about our podcast, is that you learn stuff. It may not be the true crime stuff.
It may not even be important, relevant stuff that you're going to use in life, but you will know it. If you ever go on Jeopardy, it might be helpful.
You know a lot about auxiliary cups now.
And lamps. What else do you need?
Well, on that note, I have some important news for everybody. In case you missed it when I said it multiple times, Taylor interviewed Octavio Pisano, Velasco, about this episode. And that is linked in the description below. If you are listening to us on wherever you're listening to podcasts, that is in the description somewhere. Find it there. It is on Collider. If you need to find it, you can also do Collider Taylor SVU. She asked very important questions about Velasco and Bruno.
I did.
Yeah.
I took one for the team.
Thank you.
You're welcome. He gave actually really, really good answers, especially about like, I mean, he gave good fun answers too, but I feel like we got into like the meat of this episode. And I feel like what he said about like sort of Velasco's identity and how being an immigrant and how being an undercover officer sort of impacts his character. I think this is what Yael was sort of alluding to earlier, where we didn't see it as much as in the episode, but it's clear that he's thought about it a lot. And I feel like it makes me appreciate his character a lot more.
It honestly also makes me appreciate his performance a lot more.
Yes.
I will say this. I think that if you've watched the episode, which obviously you should have if you're now listening to this, read the interview and then watch it again and see how it impacts. Yeah. Because it really, like, honestly, everything he said, I went, oh, I wish that would have been on screen.
It's clear that he like really cares about this character, and I feel like has put a lot into it. And I just hope that the show gives him more opportunities to show that, frankly. Like, I'm rooting for him. He was very lovely, and I don't know. Yeah, I think it's important, especially having, you know, a person of color, like having this culture. We don't get to see, we have a lot of Italian Catholics. Like, that's great. But like, it's nice to see other perspectives represented. I think that's important. And I think that's something that SVU can really do a lot of good with if they choose to. So I hope it gives us more of that.
I agree. If people want to tell you congratulations, how much they love the article, where are you on social media?
If you want to send me compliments or hate mail. I get that a lot too. You can go and find me on Twitter at alphaba_Ann. You can find me on Instagram at Taylor_Gates_. I also am sort of on TikTok now just because I did some interviews I wanted to upload. So I'm also an Alphaba Ann on TikTok if you want to see some Yellow Jackets red carpet interviews. That was really fun. And you can find them there.
Amazing. I am Yael Tygiel. I am on Instagram at Yael Tygiel. That's YAELTYGIEL. I'm on Blue Sky.
Sure.
If that's
what in the case, hell, sure.
In case that happens with the same name. And if you want to hear about the smut I'm reading, check out Good Little Library Mouse. Thank you to Daryl, Deanna, Alexa, Tuesday, who are live in our chat. We love having you here. We will be back next week. Yes, for the new episode. I'm very excited about that one. Thanks, everybody. We love you.